What's up, guys? We're on another late night sketchy vibe video. We're getting ice cream though. Nothing sketchy here. Gonna get that Shakey's. It's the name of the best ice cream in Fayetteville, Arkansas. If you're a concrete ice cream type person. Here's a cool testimony, y'all. A new one, a recent one of God's provision. So 1 week ago, Sunday morning, I got a email, Megan and I did, from our landlord. We rent our house, which I shared actually in a video earlier this year about how awesome of a provision the house was. Sorry, I'm so nasally. I must got boogies. Ooh, boogies. So, email from the landlord that he's gonna sell the house. Like, he didn't really explain much. He just kind of kept it super professional, and we don't have like a tight relationship with him by any means. He's like, hey, just so you know, I'm not gonna give you the option to renew your lease, but we'll sell you the house for, 6% below the current Zestimate on it. But there you go. So we learned that June 30th is going to be our last day at our house that we love, and we were in shock and for a few hours that morning, and by the end of the night I felt like I had at least got our options down. So I'm like, okay, maybe we buy. If we buy, like, we could buy this type of place or that type of place or this type of place, but also we need to figure out, like, are we going to try to, like, different options of how we could pay if we bought. And so went to the bank Monday, brought some documentation, just get that conversation started. Also met with a friend who's a realtor for lunch Monday, and man, just tell me everything from the housing market locally, what you're perceiving, what even home purchases are like. What about home construction? Like, what if we did a 1-year rental and then moved into a dream home, like in this hypothetical glory scenario? Like, what is that even possible? We're just trying to figure it all out. And anyways, and then you had renting, and it's like, well, we could rent a similar type house, like the same quality house is probably going to cost us about $800 more per month than what we were paying. And that's, tough timing with just focusing on business stuff. And anyways, we were so stressed. Not that stressed, but we were crying a lot. And we're like probably going to move into this apartment complex because we could share a wall with some of our great friends. And that would have been an awesome perk. And we would have saved money from our current rent. So I'm like, hey, we can make more money and also get super close. And there's also some cool stuff, just other cool perks to it. So we were like ready and willing, and I went to that apartment complex on Tuesday, talked to the leasing agent, talked to the owner, or like the property manager, and got shown around the place, asking questions, praying. And what I did Tuesday, as I'm gathering all the intel, trying to figure out all the stuff, I also spent a long time journaling, praying, talking to God because of this situation. But Tuesday happened to be a pre-planned personal retreat day, which I've been doing a personal retreat once a month this year. So this is my third one of the year. And I basically spent it just praying through this whole housing stuff. And, I got all the options, etc., and just the idea came to me from the Lord to, basically, he was like, well, best case scenario, I was asking him, what's going to help us prioritize peace? Because that is the, kind of big picture banner, word, phrase that I felt like the Lord spoke to me for this calendar year, is to prioritize peace. So I'm like, what's going to prioritize peace? And he's like, well, I mean, the most peaceful thing would obviously be getting to stay at Gypsum and rent. And, you know, basically through praying, I felt like God would close the door on home buying. It's like just not the time to take on a huge asset that is illiquid when you want to keep things liquid, you know. And particularly my perception of the housing market and the greater economy is that near-term negative things are ahead, you know, and in the present, but the implications are yet to be seen. What I've been, I'll say that for another video to dive deeper into that. But anyways, I didn't feel peaceful about buying a house because I'm just pretty sure houses are going to be available for cheaper within a calendar year. And that led me to renting. Basically felt like God. So anyways, let me just try to make this a little shorter because I don't even know if you're tracking with this story, but I'm praying a bunch on Tuesday. Okay, we're not going to buy a house after all. All right, we're going to rent somewhere. What would be the most, like, the way to prioritize peace as it relates to renting? I felt like God gave me this matrix of a few different scenarios. But scenario one was, best case scenario, you got to rent and stay at Gypsum. And I'm like, well, that's great, God, except that we can't because he just told us he's going to sell it. And what I feel like God said is to just try to talk to him, see if you can have a phone call conversation with him and just ask him a few questions. But basically try to figure out why is he selling it, and is there anything that would change his mind. So I wasn't like I'm not coming in here with like a big persuasive thought. I'm like, hey, it would be helpful to know, like, is there a number that we could pay in monthly rent that would cause you to reconsider selling this property? And our landlord, he owns, I don't know how many, maybe 4 or 5 properties, nothing crazy. And we knew nothing about why he was selling. But anyways, like, is there a monthly rent that would change your mind? And then also, what if we paid for a full year's rent up front? Like, if you just need some cash, like, would that be enough cash to at least kick the can down the road? So those were kind of my questions. And so anyways, I emailed the landlord, had that call, and after I had prayed, one other just helpful testimony or unfair advantage of following God is that I had already processed through my hurt and my anger and my sadness, and so I wasn't coming into that conversation like in any way embittered, but I was level-headed, I was peaceful, because I've been talking to God. And so I asked him these questions. He just kind of laughs, and then I'm like, he said, well, I mean, anyways, basically he's like, why don't you buy it? Like, if you could afford to pay for a year's rent up front, like, why don't you just buy the house? And so I kind of explained a few reasons why we don't really want to buy the house, and mainly just related to the economy, and I don't think it's a good time financially. But I also mentioned that, I'm an entrepreneur. I wasn't sure if he knew that I had transitioned out of working on staff and ministry and into entrepreneurship, and he did not know that, and that totally changed the game of this conversation. And he just like asked me questions about what I'm doing, and understanding the fact that just even from a time perspective, like, as many minutes as I can spend on the businesses, the better. And moving is just not something we want to do right now. Like, just from an emotional effort perspective, it's like just not desirable, And similarly, buying is like, just, again, it's not top of mind to think about having to take care of a property, to think about having a large chunk of our assets tied up in one property versus in investments and in inventory and in business growth. And so anyways, what I learned is that he used to be an entrepreneur until he sold his business, and he started telling stories about Warren Buffett in his early days. He's like, man, one day I'm gonna tell people like I knew Jeremy back when he was just starting off. You know, I'm like, well, probably not gonna be Warren Buffett. You know. Oh man, sorry guys. Jeez, here we are, still on an ice cream run, getting closer. So I gotta wrap this story up. So basically, he ends the phone call conversation with like, well, this has been a very interesting conversation. Thank you so much for reaching out to me, and you know, maybe I gotta talk to my wife, and we'll get back to you, but maybe this would be for the greater good. One thing I forgot to mention until now is that he also talked about how after he learned that I was an entrepreneur, he just talked about how entrepreneurship is kind of a dying art in America. He's like, everyone just wants to be nannied, like fewer people are willing to put in the work or are willing to take on the risk, and so he really did have a affinity to and an understanding of the early days of entrepreneurship, and just a gratitude to get to even talk to me and to know someone personally that is in that stage. And so all that to say, 2 days later, which was Friday, he sent us an email with an offer to extend our lease for a monthly rent price that is cheaper than that even best case scenario I thought he would come up with. So I left that phone call feeling like maybe he's gonna give us an offer, but he might way overcharge. I gave him permission to literally overcharge us, significantly, and we would at least consider it, just for the benefit of getting to stay. But it was, it wasn't increased in our rent price, but one that was definitely palpable and still below market rent by several $100s, for what he could be getting for our property. And so we prayed some more, and we said, yes, sir, Chuck, we will renew. So, man, just a testimony to God's provision, that, he's the one that gave me the idea to inquire, to reach out, have that conversation, and gave me the questions to ask. He also obviously is the one that called me into entrepreneurship, and that was the the deciding factor, the turning point, the thing that softened our landlord's heart to allow us to stay. And so, if I was a pastor, we would have to move right now, involuntarily, but because I followed God's call into entrepreneurship, we get to stay at our house, which is just crazy, right? Anyways, sorry that story I made it a little more complicated than it had to be in my storytelling. Probably because I'm excited about ice cream. Man, there's this concrete called Leroy Brown, and every time I see it, I think, Leroy Jenkins. Which, if you're a nerd like me, then you know about Leroy Jenkins, and if you don't, you don't. But I know Nick Kerbers knows Leroy Jenkins, bro. That one's for you. One of my faithful followers. Got you, bro. All right, that's all I got for y'all today. Life is worship. God is love.